All right, let's dive into Pride and Prejudice. I'm really excited to explore this one with you. It's a classic for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And you want to get into the characters, how they fit into their society, why it's lasted so long.
And we have the whole text of the novel to work with.
Perfect. So much to unpack.
It really is amazing how Jane Austen captured people. Human nature, but also the pressures of society. And it still feels relevant today.
Exactly. So let's start with Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. They're the heart of the story, aren't they?
Yeah.
What makes them stick with readers after all this time?
Well, that opening line, Austen doesn't waste any time. It is a truth universally acknowledged. And bam, we're in a world where marriage and money are everything, especially for women.
Such a sharp way to start. You know instantly what kind of world we're in.
And nobody embodies that world better than Mrs. Bennet.
Yeah.
All she cares about is marrying off her daughters well.
Oh, she's hilarious. Remember when Mr. Bingley moves in nearby? She's practically planning the wedding before she even meets him.
It's funny, but it also shows how limited women's options were back then. A good marriage was their only security.
So Austin's making a point about that too, using humor, but still, it's serious.
Right. And then we have Mr. Bennet, Elizabeth's dad, the opposite of his wife. So witty, but kind of detached from it all.
Always with the sarcastic comments.
Yeah.
Let us hope that Bingley will like one of them, and that it will not be the one I prefer.
He sees how ridiculous it is, but he doesn't really fight against it.
All right, so that's the world they live in. All this pressure around marriage. And then we have Elizabeth, our heroine. But she's no pushover.
Exactly. Elizabeth is smart, witty, and she does not care about fitting in with everyone else's expectations.
That first meeting with Darcy at the ball is perfect. He's so rude, and she doesn't just let it go. She gives it right back to him.
That shows everything about her. She wants respect, a real connection, not just a guy with money and status. And she's so sharp. She sees through everyone's act, especially the upper class.
She calls people out. And that's so relatable. We've all met those types who think they're better than everyone.
All right, now for the other half of this iconic duo, Mr. Darcy. At first, he's just this arrogant, brooding guy, but he's more complex than that, isn't he?
Oh yeah, his first impression is terrible. That scene where he won't dance with Elizabeth. Total Darcy move, all pride, all looking down on everyone.
But then he does things that don't match his attitude. Remember how he helps Elizabeth's sister, Lydia, secretly, even though he hates Wickham?
That changes everything. You start to see he's not all bad. He has compassion, a sense of honor, deeper than just following society's rules.
His journey is all about breaking those first impressions. Just like Elizabeth has to get over her own prejudices, Darcy has to deal with his pride and how he was raised.
Two strong characters, both flawed. And they change so much. It's what makes their story so good.
It's that push and pull between them. They're always challenging each other, making each other think.
And that's what makes it so satisfying when they finally do get together. It feels real, not just like a fairy tale ending.
It shows that we can get over prejudice, see people for who they truly are, not their status. But Austen doesn't make it simple. Love and marriage back then, not so easy.
The reality for women is all over this book.
Let's take Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's friend. She marries Mr. Collins for a secure life, not love.
Yeah, that was a sad choice. But it makes sense. She knew she wouldn't find a love match and had to be practical.
Compared to Elizabeth refusing to settle, it's such a contrast. It makes you think, what would you compromise for safety? Or to fit in?
That's the thing about Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
It makes you think about your own values and choices.
It really does. It's interesting how Austen uses the different places in the story, especially those big estates. They really show how society worked back then.
Oh, totally. Like Pemberley, Darcy's place. That's not just a house, it's a symbol of his whole world, right? Family history, money, this whole elegant lifestyle that kind of intimidates Elizabeth.
It's like she's stepping into his territory, completely different from her own life. But then Darcy changes when he's there. Do you remember that?
He does. He's more relaxed, almost nicer. Like when the housekeeper says he's a good master, really generous, it makes Elizabeth question everything she thought about him.
Right. It's like the societal pressures aren't on him so much when he's at home. And that visit is so important for Elizabeth. Seeing this side of Darcy, how he treats people, it makes her rethink things.
Yeah, her prejudice starts to fade. She realizes Wickham's stories were lies, and she was judging Darcy without knowing the whole truth.
And then you've got Rosings, Lady Catherine de Bourgh's place, total opposite.
Talk about intimidating.
Rosings is like the peak of that whole social hierarchy. Lady Catherine is all about family connections, being proper, and staying at the top. It's almost funny how much she tries to control everyone.
Oh, she's a character, that's for sure. Always trying to control the weather. telling everyone what to do.
But it's more than just being funny. Austen is showing us how ridiculous the upper class can be. Like when Lady Catherine tries to stop Darcy from marrying Elizabeth.
Because Elizabeth isn't good enough for him, socially speaking.
Exactly. She just wants to keep things the way they are, make sure she stays important. But the funny thing is, by trying to control Darcy, she pushes him closer to Elizabeth.
It backfires, totally. He gets rebellious, and of course, Elizabeth never backs down from a challenge.
That scene is great. She stands up for herself, for her right to make her own choices, against all those rules that try to control her life.
It's a win for being yourself, following your heart, not what society expects. And in the end, that's what wins Darcy over. Not her status, but who she really is.
It really is a victory for love, for choosing your own path. But we can't forget all the other characters. They add so much to the story, too.
Right. Austen is brilliant at creating these full, complex people who represent all different parts of human nature, not just the main characters.
Like Wickham, he's such a good villain, so charming but so manipulative. He almost tricks Elizabeth completely and ruins her chance with Darcy.
Wickham is a master at playing the game. He takes advantage of people, uses what society expects to get what he wants.
It's a warning, right? Not to be fooled by appearances. To look deeper. He's the opposite of Darcy in that way. Darcy might seem cold, but he's actually honest and kind.
Then there's Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's friend, choosing to marry Mr. Collins just for security.
It's sad, but it was the reality for women back then. She knew what her options were.
It makes you appreciate Elizabeth's strength even more, but it also shows Charlotte's practicality. She knew what she was doing.
And it adds to Austen's message about society, doesn't it? Not everyone could afford to choose love over a safe life.
And we can't leave out the Bingley sisters. All about climbing the social ladder, looking down on anyone they think is beneath them.
Their snobbery is ridiculous, and how they try to control their brother. It's funny, but it also says a lot about the upper class. All that shallowness and hypocrisy.
They're all about impressing Darcy, getting ahead.
Yeah.
And they're awful to Jane, Elizabeth's sister, because they see her as competition.
It shows how class prejudice works, judging people by their connections, not who they are.
It's amazing how Austen puts it all together. These characters, the themes. You get this whole picture of life in England back then, but it's so relevant still. It's crazy to think Pride and Prejudice came out over 200 years ago, but people still love it. Why do you think that is? What makes this story connect with people even now?
I think it's because the themes are so universal, Dealing with pride, prejudice, what society expects of you, trying to find love where you belong. Those are still things we struggle with today.
Totally. We might not have balls and fancy carriages anymore, but the core issues are the same.
And Austen's writing, it just doesn't get old. Her wit, how she makes fun of society, those characters that feel so real, it's all still captivating.
I know, right? Her dialogue is brilliant, so clever, and she gets how people are, their little flaws, but it's funny, too, not just mean.
Exactly. And Pride and Prejudice has something for everyone. You can enjoy the romance or the social commentary or just how well written it is. It works on so many levels.
I think that's why you can read it over and over again at different points in your life and get something new out of it each time.
It's also interesting how much it's inspired other things, movies, plays, even modern retellings online.
It's like this story can be adapted to fit any time, but the heart of it stays the same.
Each version brings a new perspective, right? But those themes, love, prejudice, finding yourself, they're always there.
So, thinking about modern versions,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think Pride and Prejudice would work today? Like, what would Elizabeth and Darcy be dealing with in the 21st century?
That's a good question. Some things have obviously changed, but the basic conflicts would still be relevant, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Maybe we don't have such strict class divisions, but there are other kinds of prejudice, other ways people try to pressure you to be a certain way.
Can you imagine them doing online dating, social media, trying to look perfect all the time?
I can totally see Mrs. Bennet on Instagram trying to get her daughters the most likes and followers, hoping to snag a rich husband.
And Mr. Bennet, he'd be making those witty comments on Twitter all the time, poking fun at how ridiculous everything is.
It's fun to imagine, but I think they'd still be those same characters at heart. Those struggles would still resonate.
Definitely. How to communicate, how relationships work, figuring out who you are. Those are human things. They don't change that much.
So as we wrap this up, any final thoughts on Pride and Prejudice and why it's lasted so long? What does it still have to teach us?
I think it's a reminder not to judge too quickly. Don't go by appearances or what social group someone belongs to. Look deeper.
That's a good one. It's about empathy, right? Trying to understand people.
And it's about how love can change you. Both Elizabeth and Darcy, they grow so much. They have to face their own flaws, learn what really matters.
It shows that growing up is a process. It takes time, and sometimes those tough moments are what make you a better person.
And there's a lot of hope in Pride and Prejudice, too. It's saying that even with all the pressure, the mistakes we make, we can still find love, be happy, find where we fit in.
That's a great way to put it. Pride and Prejudice keeps inspiring people, entertaining them, making them think. It shows how powerful love can be, how important it is to look at yourself honestly, and that life is complicated, but in a good way.
A true classic. It'll be around for a long time, that's for sure.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Pride and Prejudice. I hope you enjoyed exploring it with us. And until next time, happy reading.